A single cave bear molar pulled from a Spanish cave delivered a lab result that stopped researchers cold. This 1,000-pound Ice Age giant was already collapsing thousands of years before the cold ever peaked. That's Ursus spelaeus, the cave bear, an animal that roamed Europe from the caves of Spain all the way to the Ural Mountains for hundreds of thousands of years before it vanished around 24,000 years ago. And for decades, the answer to why seemed obvious. The Ice Age deepened, the world froze, the great plant eater starved, case closed. But keep your eye on that one tooth. Everything the science overturns starts with it. Let's be honest about what this animal actually was, because the reconstructions don't quite prepare you. A big male could top 1,000 pounds. Reared up on its hind legs, it stood taller at the shoulder than a grown person. Picture that shape looming in the dark of a cave mouth. This wasn't a fringe creature clinging to the edges of the map. For a very long time, the cave bear was one of the most successful large animals in Europe. We know that partly because of where they died. In caves across the continent, their skeletons don't come in ones and twos. They pile up. In Austria, there's a cave called the Drachenhöhle, the Dragon's Cave, and its floor is littered with the bones of thousands of cave bears. These were animals that crawled deep inside to hibernate, and some never woke. Winter after winter, in the dark, the weak and the young simply didn't make it to spring. Over the centuries, the bones stacked into a graveyard. Now, the first thread of the case. Look at the skull. A cave bear has a strikingly high, domed forehead. A steep dome you don't see in a brown bear. And the teeth tell you what that head was built for. Broad, flat, crushing molars. A heavy jaw. This is not a mouth designed to tear flesh. It's a mill built to grind plants, and the chemistry backs it up. Tooth wear and isotope readings pulled from cave bear bone point to a nearly pure vegetarian diet. Leaves, roots, whatever the cold landscape offered. That single fact is what made the climate story feel airtight. Because a specialist, an animal locked into one narrow food source is fragile. When its forage collapses, it has nowhere to go. So ask yourself, what could kill an animal this size, this specialized? Hold that thought, because the obvious answer is about to fail. The knot only seemed to tighten. Researchers ran radiocarbon dating on cave bear bones, and the last reliable dates landed near 24,000 years ago, right as the glaciers advanced into the peak of the last glacial maximum. Cold rises, bear disappears. The timeline fit the climate story perfectly, almost too perfectly. And that neatness is exactly what bothered one team. The dates said the cold and the death happened together. But agreeing in time isn't the same as proving cause. So they stopped reading the surface of the bones and started reading what was locked inside them. The DNA. Reading DNA out of a cave bear bone is not like swabbing a cheek. The molecule falls apart over thousands of years. What survives is broken, scattered, salted with contamination from every hand and microbe that ever touched the bone. So the work happens in a clean room lab, a technician sealed in a full suit, a single fragment glowing under a microscope, every surface scrubbed to keep modern DNA out. From bones like that, researchers pulled the genetic story of the cave bear. Teams including groups led by Verena Schunemann and later Axel Barlow sequenced mitochondrial and partial nuclear DNA from dozens of specimens scattered across Europe. Not one skeleton, dozens. Spain to the Urals, one degraded sample at a time. And here is the part that matters. What they recovered were partial sequences, fragments, stitched back together, with gaps on the readout where the code simply wasn't there, contested in places, never a living genome. Never anything close to bringing the animal back. This is where honest science matters. Notice how carefully they said it, because the temptation to overstate this is enormous. A degraded partial sequence is not a resurrection. It is a whisper, and you have to strain to hear it. But the whisper was consistent. Across all those separate bones, from caves hundreds of miles apart, the same pattern kept surfacing. Genetic diversity in the cave bear started shrinking. And it didn't start shrinking at the cold peak. It started roughly 40,000 years ago. Let that number settle, because it doesn't belong in the old story at all. 40,000 years ago, the Ice Age hadn't reached its worst. The glaciers were still advancing. The real cold was thousands of years off. And yet, the genes were already thinning out. What does thinning diversity actually look like on the ground? a population coming apart. The Great Range that once stretched across a continent, breaking into isolated pockets, each one cut off from the next. Bears in one valley no longer meeting bears in the next. Whole genetic lineages just vanishing from the record, one by one, like lights going out across a map. Not a crash, a slow bleed. And this is the moment the tidy picture breaks. Because if the decline was already underway 40,000 years ago, then the cold peak could not have started it. Climate alone did not do this, or at least not when everyone assumed it did. Look at the two clocks side by side. The bones said the last cave bears were around 24,000 years ago, right as the glaciers closed in. The genes said the decline began 40,000 years ago. That's a gap of 16,000 years between when the animals started dying out and when the cold finally arrived to finish it. Sit with that gap. 16,000 years, the old story simply cannot account for. The climate arrived far too late to be the trigger. It could be the ending. It was never the beginning. So, the question flips. If it wasn't the cold that started the collapse, what did? What else was happening in Europe roughly 40,000 years ago? At the exact moment the cave bear's diversity began to bleed away, something else spread across the continent right then. A newcomer that wanted the same dark, sheltered caves the bears needed to survive the winter. Modern humans. Modern humans. Hunters with fire, with tools, with a need to get out of the cold. And the best shelter in Ice Age Europe was exactly what the cave bear needed too. A deep, dry cave. A place to sleep off the winter. So here is the hypothesis, and I want to be honest that it is a hypothesis. Two species walked into the same caves and only one walked out long term. In places like Austria's Drachenhöhle, where thousands of bears once died in the dark, people started leaving their own marks. Fire pits, cut bones. Hunting a hibernating bear is not brave, but it is easy. A sleeping giant is a slow target. Now, layer it. You do not get one clean cause here. You get a stack. A bear built to grind plants and nothing else. A landscape that warmed, then cooled, shifting the vegetation it depended on. And then a new predator moving into its bedroom right around 40,000 years ago. Each pressure alone may be survivable. All three at once on an animal already thinning out, that is a squeeze. And this is the payoff. The thing that stopped researchers cold when they read the DNA. The molecules do not show a healthy population thriving right up to the cold peak and then dropping dead in the ice. They show the opposite, a long, quiet decline that began around 40,000 years ago, thousands of years before the glaciers hit their worst. The cave bear was not killed in a single blow by the cold. It was already fading, bleeding lineages, splitting into smaller and smaller pockets that could not find each other. The extinction was not a moment. It was a slow collapse, and the cold peak was only the last shove. That single molar from the Spanish cave, sitting in a lab tray, held that whole story in its degraded genetic fragments, a population already coming apart, recorded in code, long before anyone thought the trouble started. But here is the honest part most videos skip. The DNA still can't name the trigger with certainty. It shows the decline. It does not prove humans caused it. It cannot fully pull apart competition from climate, cannot weigh exactly how much was the spear and how much was the shifting forest. These are partial sequences, reconstructed from broken bits, contested in places. The timing overlaps beautifully with the arrival of modern humans, and overlap is a clue. Overlap is not a verdict. How much weight to give each cause is still debated among the researchers doing this work right now. What the genome does overturn is the tidy story. The one everyone told for decades, that the deepening cold alone starved the great plant eater into oblivion. That story is dead. The cold did not do this by itself, and it did not do it when the textbooks said it did. And that is the real lesson buried in these bones. For Ice Age megafauna, extinction almost never has a single villain. The cave bear did not fall to one enemy. It fell to several, stacked over thousands of years until there was nothing left to give. So, the question researchers are chasing now is the one that should keep you up. If the cave bear was already collapsing long before the cold peak, what about the others? Does that same early decline signal, that same 40,000-year fingerprint, hide in the woolly rhino, in the mammoth? If that signal is sitting in the mammoth's DNA too, it rewrites more than one extinction. It rewrites the whole ending of the Ice Age, and that is the next specimen we open.